Welcome to Look Both Ways with David and Wes, pragmatic conversations about all things transportation. We are recording live on YouTube via live stream. You can always check us out later on, what's our website? lookbothwayspodcast.com or on whatever platform you listen to your podcast on.
I'm so glad you got that right, Wes. Well done. Well done. Good start here.
I don't go to our website very often myself, but I know it exists. I update it.
That's good. That's good. Start there.
Anyways, as David suggested, I am Wes Marshall, and you are?
I am David Zipper. Glad to be here.
All right, so we're back. We're going to be talking a lot of fun stuff today, including the gas tax. We'll be talking about Singapore later during Roundabout, but I know you've been traveling a lot lately, and Singapore is not the only place you've visited.
No, I'm honestly extremely jet lagged right now, Wes. I'm going to be honest with you. I got back 2 days ago from 2 weeks, literally on the other side of the world. I was in Singapore, and before that, I was in Java, like Indonesia, a city called Yogyakarta. That's like the old historical capital of Java. I don't think you've been to that part of the world at all. Is that right?
I have not.
So let me begin by saying it's really freaking hot and humid. It was a little bit brutal for my ancestors who come from the northern Polish shtetl, as it were. But but I'm actually wearing for those who are watching, I'm wearing one of the shirts that I got in Indonesia to stay cool. It's called, you ever heard of batik, Wes? Do you know what that is?
Wait, so you paid money for that shirt?
I paid good American dollars converted into Indonesian rupiah for this shirt because it's really cool and refreshing. Batik is a style of cotton shirt design that I got that is really nice. And like the buttons are concealed. If you're watching a video, you can see me showing this. And Wes doesn't know what's good, but no, honestly, Indonesia was. I'll talk about Singapore later because there's a lot of transportation stuff there. But Indonesia was just fun, and it's a fascinating place. For one thing, have you ever? The transportation wise, it's really fascinating. Like I'm sure you too, Wes, you've read about where people talk about like the problem of motorcycle and diesel car smog in the developing world. I had never really experienced it until this, but there are so many motorcycles they have no sort of like pollution standards at all. These are like 2-stroke cheap vehicles. And it honestly hurts to be on the street getting around, particularly if otherwise it'd be really fun. But you ever heard of a becak? Do you know what that is?
No.
So I have a prop, which I'm now going to show you. So again, a little reward for those who are watching on YouTube. This is a becak. It is this little wood version of it. There's a little guy who'll be sitting here on the bike, and you as a passenger sit in this little compartment up front, and he's just like pedaling along. Often now it's a motorcycle or motorbike, getting you to where you want to go. There's a little pedal, and it's really a comfortable, easy way to get around for like $1 or $2. Except you're in the middle of all the smog, and that can really suck when it's super congested, which it often is because transit is not really around in any serious way in Indonesia. And I have to say, like, now I understand why people talk a lot about those who focus on the developing world, which I don't know a whole lot about in transportation wise. They talk about the need to electrify motorcycles. Have you heard about this a lot?
Yeah.
And now I really get it. Like, my God, that would be a huge improvement in public health and in transportation overall. I really understand it. Have you been to other parts of the world where the motorcycles are ubiquitous like this?
Not really. I mean, I know Chris Cherry, University of Tennessee, does a lot of work in this area, and like he brings like his wife and kids all to these crazy places, and comes back with weird diseases. But
nice.
My thought process has always been like, we have enough problems, like in the U.S., like for me to go tell other countries how to be doing what they should be doing. I sort of stayed away from that. Like, we don't get our own stuff right first. But when you said it hurts, like, is it like what is it? Like, is it just the noise? Is it the smog?
It's not the noise. It's the smog. Like, you can actually feel the air pollution like in the back of your throat. I've never experienced that before. It's the diesel, it's the fumes, and nothing's really moving. Like you're just sort of stuck during rush hour, which we had to use the bed shock once during rush hour, and you're totally exposed, and it sucks. And I'm sensitive to it as an American who's not used to this, but people live there and go through it every day. And I have a new appreciation, I think, for the air pollution transportation challenges in a city like this. So that was one thing. I will say, on a much happier note, it was a world of weird and delicious fruit in Indonesia and Singapore. Have you had?
That's not where I thought you were going with that.
Nope. Gonna keep on going. Rambutan. Have you ever heard of that? Like these hairy, weird balls of things that are actually really delicious. Or mangosteen. You know what this is?
No.
Still no.
I know none of this. This is all new stuff to me.
How about durian? Have you ever had durian?
No, I don't know any of that. I can't describe it. I can describe that bike you held up. It looks like a little cargo bike. I can describe your shirt, which looks like you went on a safari and came back, and now you're at some bar in Key West by yourself, trying to make friends.
It's a conversation starter. No, but wait, so you don't know what durian is? This is important. You've never heard of it?
Oh, is that another fruit?
Yeah, durian. Yes. Durian is this legendarily stinky fruit that is it's like a luxury in much of Asia. It's spiky all around all around it, and then you open it and it smells so bad, Wes, that it's literally banned from hotels in Asia. You get fined and thrown out if you bring it into a hotel because they have to fumigate the room in an intensive way. And I had my first one in Singapore, actually. And I know that I have some Asian friends who say this is the most delicious thing they've ever had. And I wish I had one to show you right now. I don't, but it literally tasted to me like nail polish remover. That was not my favorite fruit. Not what I want. Good. That's not good. No, to be clear, that is a negative. That is a net negative. So great trip. If I'm a little bit punchy now, it's because it's a 12-hour time zone difference. And I got back 2 days ago. But it was a lot of fun. And when we get to Singapore and in the show today, that is actually where I really learned a lot and had a great time transportation-wise.
So that fruit, do you have to eat it outside? Where did you even partake in this?
So, good question. Like I said, don't bring it into your hotel because you'll get in big trouble. Don't ask me how I know this. I don't want to go into it. But one evening, yes, we went to an open air durian cafe in Singapore where you spend a good bit of money because this is a luxurious fruit. I think we spent $40 on a big old durian. It's sort of like a sushi chef. There's a durian guy with a machete who sliced it open, explained to us how to eat it. Really nice guy, actually. And then you sort of you actually get gloves, plastic gloves to put on because it'll stink up your fingers so bad. You're making faces that you're not really into this.
This is just bizarre.
Yeah, it is. But go to this is all over Asia. The people freaking love it. It's like a celebratory fruit. People get really excited about it. But yeah, so I was picking at little pieces of it, and I honestly could barely get through it. I was I really wanted to love it. People say it's a creamy version of a mango, but all I was really getting was nail polish remover.
The people that were with you, they did enjoy it more than you, or were they on your?
They were. I was with another American, borderline. I think. We were not feeling it. There were other people from Singapore who were living it up in this open air cafe, though. Yeah.
Is this all a hoax just to get Americans to give them $40 for a piece of fruit? Is that
so? That's a good question.
To like it and come on in here with this fancy cafe. I'm gonna sell you this, 30-cent piece of fruit for $40. And
I'm gonna say no because I know too many Asian people who are really excited about durian. However, it's a good question because I also spent some time in the Czech Republic where you can always get absinthe there. Everyone talks about absinthe being a Czech beverage. I lived in the Czech Republic for a little while. No Czechs I know ever touch absinthe. It's just a way of charging a lot of money to dumb tourists who want to get drunk. It's also gross as shit. I'm not going to curse. It's really disgusting. So good question, but I think people genuinely really do love durian.
I mean, there are things I know in Australia, nobody drinks Foster's beer. That's just an Americanized Australian beer that we have here, they don't really drink there. Like there's things like that, but I don't like they're not trying to make money in Australia off of that sort of stuff. So a little bit of a different scenario, but like, can we go back to the shirt though? Like,
So wait, I'm actually no. So yeah, it is a. By the way, someone just texted me saying "cool shirt alert." So you could say what you will, but your opinion matters
so
not
you
to
know,
me.
like, if you go someplace and it starts raining, you buy like a poncho. Like, is that what happened? It was just so hot and your clothes weren't, and you had to get something that was
I
lighter
mean,
weight.
it is true that I was sweating through multiple shirts a day partly because again, I am from Stettelstock of Northern Europe, but no, the shirts like it's actually like they like it's hot for everyone in Indonesia. The Indonesians know it's hot too, so they have developed these sorts of like cotton shirts that are really cool and great. And so I actually got a whole bunch. If you want, Wes, I'll wear one for the next episode too.
How many did you get?
No comment, but more than one. They're really cheap. They're like, I don't know, like $10 or something. And they were very like cool, like as in like not hot. They're also cool looking, I think, even if you don't appreciate it.
Yeah. So
yeah.
You see David walking around the streets of DC this summer and it's hot there.
Like,
so
look,
this
like,
is a perfect.
like the design aligns across the center of the shirt. Like it's like, this is like a well-crafted piece of fabric here.
Yeah. All right. If you say so.
Meanwhile, for those who can't see, Wes is wearing like a Hoosier Gym t-shirt. So we are like really playing the
actually,
tight here.
this recollects a topic we hit on the show before. Like when we talked about driving far distances, I did that cross-country trip. And when I hit traffic in Indianapolis, I got off the road. I went to the Hoosier Gym and I bought this sweatshirt there. Yeah. So this is...
We, as discussed previously, we know that you're always up for the sports ball, so it's on brand for you as well.
It was actually my favorite thing we stopped at. I mean, better than Mount Rushmore, better than Niagara Falls, better than like the Bean in Chicago or that Leaning Tower of Pisa outside of Chicago. Like a lot of weird stuff. The Corn Palace. You ever been to the Corn Palace in South Dakota?
I have never been to South Dakota, period.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's a wild place. But this was my favorite thing. Like, actually got to shoot hoops in the gym where they filmed Hoosiers. So
that is actually pretty cool. Even I will admit that is pretty cool. I think we've probably lost half of our audience now as we're talking about clothes for like way too long. But we can just lean into it. Should we?
Well, let's get them back by talking about the gas tax, right?
Sorry. For those who are still with us, I warned Wes before we started that I was going to be extremely punchy because I'm extremely jet lagged and sleep deprived. So, all bets are off for the next however long this goes. But yes, let's talk about the gas tax, Wes. Go ahead.
All right, so time for Word on the Street, where we discuss a transportation issue in the news. And this week, we're going to be talking about some of the proposals to suspend the gas tax. You want to give a quick overview of what you've heard on this?
Yeah, sure. So I think that probably those who are listening may be aware that the federal gas tax in the U.S. is set at 18.4 cents per gallon. And Wes, do you know when it was last changed?
I do. It was when I was still in high school. So it was 1993. And I also know that was the same year that David Letterman started up at The Late Show on CBS, given all the Stephen Colbert stuff last week. I heard like that's sort of going back in history. So it's been a minute since we've updated that.
It has been a minute indeed. And by the way, inflation has basically eroded the value of the gas tax during that time. So for those who, just a quick primer for those who may not be aware, but the gas tax at the federal level goes to the Highway Trust Fund, which pays for federal investments in transportation through formula funding. It doesn't cover all of the transportation expenses in the U.S., so there's revenue from the general fund that's also put into it, and that amount coming from the general fund has been growing because the gas tax covers less and less of overall federal transportation expenses. And
the last number on that I heard, it covers about 20% or 1/5 of just the highway spending.
Is that what it is now? It keeps falling. I believe you, but I think conceptually, it's also worth noting that gas taxes are the way that we have historically funded transportation in the U.S. and in other countries too in the West. States collect revenue from gas taxes that goes toward transportation, and other countries do as well. So as gas prices in the U.S. are up around 50% from what I last saw since Trump started the war with Iran, and that as a result, there's a lot of consternation politically among Republicans, people getting angry about rising prices of gas. I think politicians all around the world are sometimes are concerned about it, and it can be a real economic issue, frankly, because higher gas prices doesn't just hit consumers; it also leads to inflation and leads to higher transport costs. So Trump has been talking about suspending the gas tax. He said a couple of weeks ago, "I think it's a great idea. We can take off the gas tax for a period of time." And then when gas goes down, we'll phase it back in. The state of Indiana froze its gas tax on April 3rd for 3 months and may extend it, in April and may extend it for 3 months. And other countries are doing the same. Australia froze its gas tax in March, right after the war started with Iran. So this is something that's a trend sort of all around the world as consumers are feeling the pinch. And I have some opinions on this, and I know you do too, Wes. So I'll start with you. Do you think it's a good idea to pause the gas tax?
I mean, no. I mean, I think people are barely going to notice this. I mean, 18.4 cents. I mean, and gas now is what, like $4.60 or something?
Yeah,
so
it's up $1.50 since the war on average.
Right. So it went from $3 to like $4.50, $4.60. And so if you fill up your car, you say you get like 15 gallons of gas, you're talking like $70. You're saving less than $3 off of that. Like, so it's a drop in the bucket compared to, so yes, it might be good politics, but it's I don't think people are going to really notice it. I mean, there's evidence like in Australia, in India, where they've done to some extent this before. They've had to pressure the oil industry and the gas stations to actually pass the savings on to the consumers because they weren't even doing that. So that is likely what would happen here. So
that's an important point, by the way. This ends up being a windfall for gas stations often.
Yeah. So that's who you're sort of helping out. And I don't think, one of the gas stations I sometimes go to, you get 5 cents off per gallon just by shopping at their related grocery store. And it doesn't add up to that much. And so this is, something similar. It's not going to be that much in the grand scheme of things. And, we're already so behind on the amount of money we're putting towards infrastructure. Like it just, I don't know. It sort of feels like by doing this, we're already sort of putting all of our infrastructure on like a credit card, right? And we're kind of saying now, well, let's just pay the minimum on that and see how that goes, like for the foreseeable future.
Well, I will say this. As bad an idea as this is, it's not a uniquely bad idea among Republicans. Remember Biden was talking about doing the same thing a couple of years ago? I wrote an article in Slate at the time, I recall. Democrats fall for this too. When gas prices rise, they want to suspend the gas tax. And what annoys me, many of the aspects of this annoy me, but one is you never hear people saying, hey, look, gas prices are really low right now, so why don't we increase the gas tax because consumers won't feel it so much? Wouldn't that be the natural mirror image of the argument, well, gas prices are high, consumers are feeling it, so let's temporarily lower the tax? Doesn't seem to work that way.
I mean, that makes some sense. So if the idea would be to keep gas prices pretty consistent across the board, so when they go up and we flip the gas tax up or down, depending what the real gas prices are doing, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, bigger picture, we'd probably need to find a better way to fund transportation, but
Correct.
As is, this is... we're talking about this policy given our current state of affairs, and I don't know. It's not a transportation policy. It's not good economics. It's not good infrastructure policy, but it is good politics. So I think
that's all it is. It's good. It's not good climate policy. It's not good anything except for potentially a short-term political win. It's just that all I can say is if you are a consumer or a driver, this is not going to help you. I think your point about the potential suspension not being passed on to drivers themselves is a really important one that I'm not sure people fully appreciate.
And we're going to pay for it later too. I mean, I think even if they do suspend the gas tax, we're going to it's like deferring maintenance. Like we're gonna have to borrow more later or have another bailout later, and that money comes from the taxpayers too, in some way, shape, or form. So it, you're taking from Peter to pay Paul, and that's kind of what we're doing
Yep.
here. And you're making gasoline a little bit cheaper for the consumers, but at the same time, like we said before, the oil companies are going to be, it's helping them absorb the higher oil prices too.
Well, I think the oil companies are doing just fine, right? They're not
Oh yeah,
increasing production.
they're fine.
Yeah, like Trump is pushing them to increase production in the wake of the Iran war. And from what I've read, they basically have said, understandably, look, we're not going to make long-term changes in our plans because of a short-term spike in demand. So that's reasonable enough. But what that means is they're basically getting windfall profits.
Yeah, and I looked up the numbers from Australia. So theirs was 52 like and a half cents per liter, and they dropped it to 20 and a half cents per liter. So for them, for an average filling up of your tank, it's almost $20 in Australian dollars. But it's more money kind of on the consumer side out of helping them out of their pockets, but it's $3 billion package that they need to fund this. Like, so that money is also coming from somewhere else that they're filling in the gas tax revenue being lost. So I don't know. It's a little bit of apples and oranges, but it's all money that still needs to be spent on infrastructure that we're losing out on.
Yeah.
And who that comes from and when it comes from them is sort of what you're arguing about.
Yeah, it's bad policy. I think we completely agree on that. And I also think it's worth emphasizing something that you mentioned. I was going to go there too, which is to say ultimately what we really need is some sort of road use charge system to get away from the gas tax. Like we haven't talked about it yet. I'm sure we will, but there was just a House proposed version of the surface transportation bill. I don't know if you saw that. But one element in there, this is actually supported, apparently it's bipartisan, which is a little bit surprising. A lot of people are asking why Democrats in the House would go along with anything right now rather than hold off and hope for a good outcome in November, which seems pretty likely at this point. But one of the elements in the House proposed bill was a fee that electric vehicle owners would pay to basically compensate, theoretically, for their lack of contribution toward the gas tax. And a lot of people are angry about that. It's controversial. But the idea of charging a fee based on road use is exactly where we need to be going. It's just it should apply to everybody, not just EV owners, I would say.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And, I feel like I've heard that come up as a policy proposal again and again, and it never makes its way through. Like maybe something will change now. But I mean, the gas tax is such a small drop in the bucket. I mean, it's only 4% of our current gas price. Like, so we're just knocking off a few pennies on the dollar.
Yeah.
And gas prices jumped up like $1.50 over the last 3 months, like knocking 18 cents off of that. Like, thanks, fellas. Like,
Yeah.
And who knows? Like, once they do this, gas prices could go up another 50 cents. So you end up losing it anyways. I don't know. It seems like short-term thinking that doesn't really solve anything.
No. Well, except for politics. If you're really worried about the political blowback from policy, from what's happening in Iran, then I can understand why Republicans would want to do this. I really don't understand why Democrats would support it. It's bad policy, and the political pressure from the spike in gas prices is all because of what Trump and his administration have done in starting this war. So it's baffling to me why any Democrats would get behind a proposal like this, which, if anything, might somewhat mitigate the blowback against Trump and his allies. Why help him?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that is where he is feeling the heat a little bit, is on gas prices, even though, like we talked about before, there's a lot of good things that come out of higher gas prices. But in this case, you're right. I mean, why help them out if that is, especially with the midterms coming up in November, like this is where they kind of need to hold their feet to the fire.
Yeah, I think that is exactly right. What is it? What is that famous line? Is it Sun Tzu? It feels like it's Sun Tzu. Never get in the way when your enemy is making a mistake.
I was trying to make the metaphor and related to like the credit card payments. I think I figured out what it is as I sat here thinking. It's like skipping the minimum payment on a credit card that's already maxed out. Like that feels like what we'd be doing if we just paused the gas tax. Does that make sense?
It probably does, but as I've said before, I'm really jet lagged and I can't make the connection in my head. So I'm just going to say yes and hope you'll allow me to move on.
Yeah, I think it's time to move on to Roundabout. So we get to hear more about David's travels of the first one. So you're going to tell us some more specifics about the Singapore part of your trip.
Yeah. So as some listeners might have guessed, I really was in Singapore because I'm writing a book about congestion pricing, and Singapore, I think somewhat famously in transportation circles, implemented the world's first congestion pricing program in 1975. So it was honestly really cool. I won't go into details about that. You can read about it when the book comes out, but I was able to meet a guy who actually worked under Lee Kuan Yew, worked on the actual implementation of that very first congestion pricing program. And I'll just tell you one fun little anecdote about that, Wes. Like, I think, I have a stereotype, and maybe you do too, of Singapore being this like law-abiding, efficient place, right? And this guy was telling me that when when this cordon was created, there were people basically at the major highways, sort of like making sure that you had your permit to get into the CBD. And in order to avoid those major highways, there were some drivers that would basically go to secondary, like one-way streets into downtown that were going from downtown out, and they would reverse down that one-way street to get into the zone and avoid paying like $3 to do the fee. And I was like, that's awesome, and kind of goes against type for what I imagine Singapore being like. Sorry, you want to jump in?
No, I mean, I'm still amazed that you found some of the people that implemented this. Because this came to be, before either of us were born, and we're not that young. So this
even
amazing
before you, I'm younger than you. I want everyone to know that. So before you were born,
and you, like that's how the math works. Like if it's me, you're included in that.
No, that's true. No, it's honestly really cool. I feel like it was fortunate that I could go there at a time when a lot of the original leaders are still alive and
that's amazing.
Happy to talk.
Yeah.
It was really fun, honestly. So I drove around and I experienced it. I'm going to write an article or two about the congestion pricing elements, and I'll of course have a chapter in the book.
Did you back down any of those streets when you were driving around?
I did not, but I did drive around with a couple of nice people who let me sort of go shotgun as I experienced the tolling system myself.
How much is the fee now? Like if a fruit is $40, what are we talking for?
I got a pretty expensive fruit, to be fair, but it's actually based on gantries. So it's not like there's a zone anymore. They got rid of that in 1998, and now there are these toll gantries all around, not just the center city, but sort of freeways. They're not freeway, but expressways, I should say, all across Singapore. And as you're going under the gantry, basically you're paying $2 or $4 in Singapore dollars, or whatever it is, and you hear a little ping on the contraption that's installed on your in your car that tells you that the transaction went through. So I asked actually a taxi driver, what's the most you've ever seen someone pay, or you've had to pay going from one part of Singapore to another? And he said like 11 Singapore dollars, which is about $9 American from one side to the other. But it's a really interesting program. I'm going to write about it, both in an article and in the chapter, so we can talk more. But honestly, I was saying earlier, before we started the podcast, we could do a whole episode just about Singapore. There's so many interesting transportation ideas there. But I thought that it'd actually be worthwhile to talk with you and to sort of share what I thought was pretty interesting was the Singaporean approach toward reducing friction, is the term they use, which is basically means blockage of traffic lanes. And I got a window into this from Paul Barter, who I would shout out to Paul. He's a former professor, a sort of parking and transportation researcher, Australian, based in Singapore. and he's a listener to the podcast, which is awesome. And he was kind enough to give me a tour of a couple neighborhoods of Singapore, and he explained how some of this stuff works. And a couple elements of their sort of curb policy, I think, are really, to me at least, striking. One involves ride hail. There's no Uber in Singapore, but there's Grab. I took a Grab a whole lot. It's pretty cheap. And if you hail a Grab on a street, it's not going to come to wherever you are necessarily the way that an Uber or Lyft would in America. Instead, you have to walk a block or 2 blocks to a pickup point that is going to be usually off street a little bit. It's like a semicircle in front of a hotel or in front of an office building or something like that, where you can board the vehicle, or the vehicle can wait for a minute or two without obstructing traffic lanes. A taxi you can still board on the street, but there's no Uber, but for Grab or other ride-hail vehicles, you actually have these off-street pickups, which I think is really quite cool. And it worked actually quite well for me. It was very easy when I used it. Have you ever seen anything like that, Wes? I had not.
So why do they differentiate between taxis and the Uber Lyft type ride hail?
I don't know. I didn't actually ask that because I didn't take taxis. I just took Grab. My hypothesis would be that if you're hailing a taxi on the street, you're getting in right away. So whatever obstruction there is momentary. With Uber or Lyft, you and I know, at least in my experience, often, I'm a minute late to get into it, or you're like trying to figure out where the vehicle is or compared to where I am, blah, blah, blah. So the blockage could be longer. That's my hypothesis, but I didn't get into it because it was something that Paul and I chatted about, but I didn't interview public officials about it, for example.
And by the way, if people want to learn more about Singapore, I guess they can wait for your articles and book. But Paul does make some great videos on YouTube that I've seen where he explains a lot of this stuff. So
we'll put it in show notes.
Yeah, good point. So I don't know. Big picture, I'm curious. Do you think Singapore can be at the forefront of all these things because it's like a city-state country, like as opposed to having a federal government to deal with because the city is the country? I feel like they have a lot more agility. Like imagine if, New York was its own country. Like it'd be a lot easier for them to do a lot of things, or any other city for that matter. Is that what's happening there, or is there something else that's leading them to be so interesting in these transportation type ways?
Well, I think it's a combination of things. There's a term that I've seen used by actually an academic describing the economic development strategy of Singapore, which is efficiency infrastructure. And that's kind of part and parcel of the Singapore MO and the reputation and sort of like the sort of structure of how they do policy making and how they maintain legitimacy for a very strong government, which is kind of democratic. Like they do, the leaders there I now understand do care about public opinion. It's not a total autocracy by any stretch. It's true that you cannot buy chewing gum. However, there are real elections and the governing party does care how they do.
So that efficiency term that you bring up is the idea that like this, is our infrastructure. We now need to figure out how to make it as efficient as possible. Like that's why
I think that's like part
road
of it.
Pricing comes into it. Like,
well, they love using market-based pricing for all kinds of things, for housing, for utilities, for obviously for congestion pricing. But they also enact policies. It really does feel like it's the kind of place, reminds me a little bit of when I worked for Michael Bloomberg in New York City government way back when, like 15 years ago, where he really was, I would say, like motivated by cost benefit analysis. Like politics didn't play that much of a role with him because he didn't need special interest money in any way. Yeah. And it was kind of nice. And Singapore sort of works that way. Another policy related to the curb, by the way, which I'd never seen before, is that on many streets where there's a lot of retail activity, you have sidewalks that are parallel to the street. That's normal. And then you have these sort of strips of dense vegetation and trees between the road and the sidewalk. So that's obviously really bad for clear zone purposes, right? That's a joke because Wes and I both know that clear zones are sort of a BS version of road safety. But it's really an interesting structure because you have these dense, lush vegetation strips that are really kind of attractive. They create some shade, which matters a lot. They capture stormwater, But what Paul was explaining to me too is that they also act as a deterrent from car drivers pulling over for a minute to run in to do a quick errand with their lights flashing. And they also deter, frankly, pedestrians from doing mid-block crossings. So again,
so this
trying to
isn't just
eliminate
like
friction.
this is not like a grassed area that you can walk over. Like this is like a jungle that you cannot.
It's a mini jungle. Yeah, I mean, there could be snakes. There could be snakes. No, I have photos I could share. It's a really interesting move, and I could see why they did it. Again, with this seems like really determined focus on eliminating friction, which can get in the way of traffic flow.
Well, a lot of U.S. engineers, like, they say, oh, we have a jaywalking problem. So they put up a fence in the median or a fence along like when I was in Vegas, there's fences like along the sidewalks that keep you from sort of walking out. Like this is a more natural version of that. But has this always been there? Like these things obviously take a long time to grow. Like was this part of the plan? They're just...
Well, I think it's going to, yeah, go ahead. Or what?
Or it just has always been there, and now they're realizing that there's some benefits to it with like ride hailing and stuff like that.
No, it was well. I think the vegetation stuff is very deliberately a way of maintaining traffic flow. But you're actually pointing to what I think is sort of a tension or almost contradiction in the Singaporean transportation system, which is that they really are focused on maintaining a high level of service for those who can get a car. And it's very expensive to own a car in Singapore. You pay $100,000 just to have the right to get a car before you actually buy the car. But once you have it, the idea is that you can travel unimpeded. That's the whole idea of the congestion pricing program, these gantry-based tolls, and what we were just describing about other ways of limiting the obstruction of lanes. But the problem is, and I'm sure you can think of this immediately, Wes, it's like, if that's the goal, it's sort of at odds with the other goal that Singapore has, like many developed cities do, which is in Singapore, they call it a car light society, trying to encourage people to walk and bike. And there were several times when I was like at a crossing signal in Singapore. It's freaking hot. I'm sweating, not just because I always sweat when it's like above 73 degrees, but because it was really, really hot. And, I'm waiting at the cars go by because the traffic lights look, they're calibrated to maximize flow. And the pedestrians like myself have to just sort of sit there and broil for what feels like a longer time than is necessary. There is a tension between being a car light society and being a place where you're minimizing delays to those who are driving, which is something I'm still thinking through and I found really interesting.
Well, I saw you share some pictures on Blue Sky that showed some wide arterials in Singapore. Yeah, I mean,
it's not the most pedestrian friendly place I've been by a mile.
I think when you think of Singapore, having not seen it, I didn't really picture that. But and I don't know, it's a tale of two cities to some extent. They have that kind of car-focused transportation system surrounding some nicer pedestrian areas. Because I think even if you're a pedestrian on the sidewalk, like that jungle in between you and the cars probably is nice. Like you get some shade, but you also get protection. You get, some buffer from the noise, from the smog that we talked about before, like stuff like that. I mean, I don't know. There's some niceties that probably come along with that. And going back to your original point, like those pullouts that you mentioned, like were those built after the fact, like for the ride hail, or were those?
I actually don't know. I don't know the history of them. I just know the experience of using them felt clean and easy for me as a rider. And I also know that when I took a dozen or more ride hail trips, and at no point was I blocking a traffic lane at all. And anytime I take an Uber or Lyft, I know that at least briefly I'm going to be blocking traffic pretty much.
So this wasn't a parking lot. This was just like a little turnout where they pull in, pull
turnout.
out. Like, okay.
And they're designated on the Grab map. You can pick one that's close to where you want to go and walk over there. It was a really interesting policy design choice, and it's again specific to ride hail. I think it's frankly a smart move. Maybe we've got listeners who will tell me or tell us that that there's other places they've been that mandate the same thing. I personally never seen it before in my travels.
I've heard of places trying to do that, but not successfully. Like basically Uber and Lyft have overrun them and not followed the rules like they were supposed to. Like, so, I mean, that seems like what happens in other places. So maybe they have a better way of enforcing it. I'm not. Did you hear anything about that?
They've got a super strong government there. It's like there's a shirt that you can buy as a tourist of like basically like illustrating all the various fines you can get in Singapore for breaking laws, whether it's jaywalking or like buying gum or I mean, they literally execute drug dealers in Singapore. Like they have a very, very strong rule of law there. So I think that, yeah, they have no problem in, requiring those rules around like ride-hail behavior. I put it this way: like Paul and I were driving around, and he was saying, "Oh yeah, so we've got like automatic cameras all over the place." I was like, "Really? How many are there? Do you know?" Because I'm thinking like in like Toronto before they had to be removed because of Doug Ford, the Ontario Premier. Toronto had like 100 or something, if I remember right. And Paul was like, "Oh, in Singapore we have thousands. I have no idea. Thousands of them. Thousands of traffic cameras in a single city."
Yeah.
It's just wild.
Now I know where I've seen your shirt before is Miami Vice episode where the drug dealer in Miami is wearing that exact same shirt as you. So I'm surprised you put it on. Like,
you know what?
Given that they execute drug dealers,
you're just jealous that I have a cool shirt and you don't. That's just how it is. Right. But no, I will say I think like, and then we can move on. But I think something that was really interesting to me as sort of as a high level learning is that I think Singapore adopted a lot of these car restrictions and early in its history in the 60s and 70s, not because it had some sort of love of pedestrians or wanted to like just get people to not use the car because cars are bad for cities, the way that you might see happening these days in European cities and sometimes in American ones as well. But really just because they didn't have space. They wanted to make sure that if you did have a car, you wouldn't be stuck in traffic because they knew that the whole country would grind to a halt otherwise. And what's interesting is I think it's only, from what many people told me this, including, frankly, senior city officials I interviewed, it's only in the last 15 years or 20 years that the city leaders or country leaders in Singapore have kind of acknowledged that there's no way that they could optimize car ownership such that everybody could have a car who wants one. There's just no way. The only way to have a successful transportation network is through what they call a car light society with robust transit, people walking and biking. And that's actually led to a shift in policymaking to make some of the streets more pedestrian friendly. So pushing back against some of those 6-lane arterials through the center city that I took a photograph of, which is an interesting evolution. And I didn't know about that, frankly, till I went there. And we hold up Singapore, at least I think of Singapore as like a model for urban design. And I think it might become one, but they didn't have everything figured out 50 years ago, the way that, I might have imagined when I first heard it was the initial place to adopt congestion pricing.
So I just looked up, I was curious how many cars there are in Singapore, because I knew the population was almost 6 million people.
About 1 million cars, am I right?
No, it says between 650,000 to like 660,000 private cars in Singapore. I think if you include other types, so motorcycles, buses, taxis, is probably closer to 1 million.
Yeah, the 1 million is a number that I've heard, but that makes sense. The majority of Singapore families do not have a car.
Yeah,
which is remarkable in a place where the GDP per capita is comparable to America.
I mean, well, if you have to pay $100,000 for the right to purchase a car, that is one stick that they use but they also try to add carrots as well. I mean, I think.
Exactly right.
Did you use the transit system while you were there?
I did, MRT. It is, many lines are automated. I don't know exactly how many, but many of them are. It is fast, easy, distance-based charging, tap to pay with your credit card or your smartphone. Really simple, air-conditioned, of course. It's a very impressive system, and they do with transit something that I've seen Japan do really well, which is to basically leverage transit stops to build major developments, often retail developments, malls, which are very popular in Singapore given how hot it is, indoor malls, right on top of the transit stop, cool. Which is pretty neat. So the transit is very, very good in Singapore, and they've invested heavily in it.
That is good to hear. Well, I know we'll hear a lot more about Singapore from you and your articles and book.
Yeah, I have a lot to write about Singapore. Now that I've been there, I have a lot to write, but it was a fascinating place. And if folks have other insights that I should know about and I may not be aware of, feel free to contact me or email us at the podcast. lookbothwayspod@gmail.com. But sorry, Wes, you've been doing some traveling too, to a place that's very different from Singapore.
Oh yeah, it could not be more different. I was in Fargo, North Dakota. So Singapore has what, 6 million people. Fargo,
Has like six.
Yeah, actually, I think it is the biggest city in North Dakota. So there's over 100,000 people.
Oh, really? Okay.
I mean, but still, compared to Singapore, it's a totally different universe. But one of the interesting things is some of the underlying issues are similar. Like urban space is still valuable. There's limited curb supply, and there's more demand than they can handle. Singapore famously responds with pricing. Fargo responds with a pretty complicated rule book. So I'll get to that. So I mean, I think a little. If you don't know Fargo, I think it dates back to like the 1800s. It was founded by the guy who founded Wells Fargo, so William Fargo. And you can kind of feel that old frontier rail town. Like, so I really do like downtown Fargo.
Can I ask a quick question though before you go on? Do people talk like in the movie Fargo?
I don't know. I'm not sure how often I'm talking to real Fargonians. I don't know if that is the term for them, but I'm meeting like with a research group there, and people are coming from all different states to meet. So,
oh man, I always wanted to know. You know what I'm talking about? Because it's like a more extreme version of the Minnesota accent in that movie from the 90s, which is so good. But anyway, I'm sorry, I'm distracting you. Please go on.
No, that's good. I mean, but weirdly, I've been there like 10 times over the last 15 years, and I've gotten pretty good weather almost every time I've gone, which I realize may not be giving me the full Fargo experience, but I like lots of it. Like they got old buildings, like walkable downtown, a lot of local businesses, some interesting streets. Like some of the neighborhoods right off downtown are amazing. They have these great old growth tree canopies. They have these sidewalks that are, similar to Singapore. They're set back really far from the street, but it's just kind of grass and trees. So like, I think I measured there's 20 feet between the curb and where the sidewalk starts. So the grassy area is just huge. And there's sort of a lot of parts of Fargo where you're like, yeah, this is great. This place works. But you don't have to go out very far before that changes. Pretty quickly, you're in big roads that lead to even bigger roads that lead to highways. And, so there's similar to a lot of other cities where it's a nice human scale downtown and pretty big car oriented stuff right outside of it. But I want to talk about the downtown a little bit because one of the interesting things about it is Fargo, it feels like a lot of other smaller cities of that typology, really tries hard not to make people pay for parking. Like instead, they have this whole puzzle of rules. So you can park here for 2 hours or there for 90 minutes or like 4 hours way over there or 15 minutes over here. And you can't just even move your car from one spot to another because they have all these weird rules on reparking and which block face it can be on. And then you can't park overnight on some streets and you can on others. It depends if it's Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's just so complicated. Like, so I'm thinking is like, I don't know, they compensate with all these rules and they have this whole maze of what you can and can't do. And like, I get it. Paying for parking can be annoying. Like, there's very few people, maybe other than Donald Shoup or like Tony Jordan, that love pulling out the phone and paying for parking. But what they've ended up with, to me, feels more annoying. It feels like the city is trying so hard not to charge you directly that they end up charging you via confusion and tickets and just these weird rules you have to decode. So I don't know. David, am I overreacting to this, or is this a problem in smaller cities where instead of making the parking costs visible, they have to hide it within this labyrinth of rules and just ordinances?
Well, I guess I'm like, was all the parking taken in Fargo? Like, was there a shortage of parking?
No, it seems like, I don't know. I was there after the university semester had ended, so there's probably a lot fewer people there when I was there last week than maybe a month ago. So maybe I'm not getting what it is normally like because it's a college town to some extent, with North Dakota State University being right near the downtown. So it's hard to say.
Well, I guess that was going to be my question is, like, I think Shoup and before him, William Vickery would say, like, look, if there's some places where you shouldn't charge for parking because there's there's no like the demand doesn't cover all the spots that are available.
Right. I mean, so if you do price it like Donald Shoup would say, so you get like 3 empty spots per block face, or for 80%, 5% occupancy, like sometimes the right price is 0.
Yeah.
And I think Shoup has even said, like, sometimes in that San Francisco park analysis they were doing, like the price ended up being negative. Like they would say we should be paying people to park here, which obviously they didn't do. But yeah, but I don't think this is one of those places. I do think there are definitely some blocks where the parking is going to be full, even given their rules, but it's just they end up with people having to come out of restaurants or their workplace to move their car. And like this happened in other cities that I've worked with. I remember being on Nantucket, and like that's what they told me. They don't charge for parking there, but you had to move your car every 2 hours. So anyone that worked in and around downtown, there was this big musical chairs every 2 hours where everybody got up, they all moved their cars like one block, and they all went back to work. And it just made no sense to me where, you should let people park as long as they want, but, maybe after 2 hours, the price jumps up to something really high, right? If you don't want people parking there too long, you make them pay for it. And it just seems so much easier to me just to treat it like a market to some extent, as opposed to this game of musical chairs everyone is playing.
Well, I almost wonder if that creates like a market opportunity. If there's like an entrepreneur who sets up a parking garage where they charge a modest amount of money and to basically help you avoid having to move your car throughout the whole day. You know what I mean? And it's sort of like if that person is successful, it shows that there's a demand for an efficient
and you can't do that on Nantucket. I mean, the prices there are crazy high. Actually, though, the people we were working with back then were trying. Their goal was to build a waterfront parking garage, which we told them that's not the best idea. But in North Dakota, in Fargo, you could do that. Like you could do something like that. But again, I mean, most people don't love parking in parking garages. Like they'd much rather park on the street and be able to, walk to their destination and not have to go through the parking garage.
I'll say in response, parking reminds me of tolls in a way, in the sense of just how freaking irrational people are about having to pay a modest amount of money. And to just loop it back really quick to Singapore, one thing that I learned and was just interested in when I was there is, we talked about how, you pay $100,000 in Singapore to have the right to get a car. And then you pay these like de minimis amounts in toll. It's called the ERP program of like $1 or $2 to pass various choke points or congested points on freeways or expressways rather. And what's funny is like 2/3 of the cost of a car ownership in Singapore is the initial purchase, because there's all these taxes and fees. But people are really price inelastic, it turns out. People still buy the cars. It doesn't really change behavior all that much. However, those like $2 fees on tolls really do change behavior. They change when people travel, what routes they take. People are just not rational. It's like the transaction itself induces people to act differently, even though it's really irrational. They could save much more money by focusing on the initial purchase of the vehicle. It's just not what people do. And Singaporeans, by the officials, are well aware of this. And they're like, hey, it's great. It allows us to basically change behavior at a much lower expense. But I wonder if parking is a similar way, because we pay parking so often, or we go through parking so much, that the idea of even paying a small amount to park several times a week just makes people be irrationally irritated. And it's just a huge obstacle in efficient policymaking.
And I think it also speaks, on one hand, you would want to reduce the friction of having to pay. And I think that's what, Singapore probably does with those gantries, where, it automatically deducts from something, right? You don't have to physically do something to pay.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. But for most parking situations, you are doing that. You are having to pull out an app and like make that payment. Or, I remember going through the Mass Pike toll booths back in the day. You literally had to pull out change and throw it on a bucket as you went by, and you felt like that you were throwing money and getting, there was a transaction. But when it's overly automated and you don't have you're not actually doing anything, does that reduce? I'm guessing it does. It reduce the behavior elements of that.
I don't know. It's funny. This is something that I spent a lot of time talking to people about, precisely this, when I was in Singapore. And what the government officials told me is like, and I heard this myself, there's like this audible ping when you're paying a toll, which by the way, you do not hear when using Easy Pass in America on the East Coast.
Right.
And they told me in Singapore, we absolutely want the ping because it's like a nudge. People are it's like it's an awareness that you just paid something. And in Singapore, they're adamant we use these tolls to ensure free flow of traffic, not to maximize the amount of money we can raise. So we actually want people to feel a little bit of pain when that fee is paid automatically. So I guess my point is, I think that automating does not necessarily make it more, make people less annoyed to be paying. And in some ways, it's actually good that you feel that pain.
I love that idea, and I think that makes perfect sense. Like, yes, we want to reduce friction, but people still need to know when it's being paid. I mean, I think in parking is one of the few things with cars that you feel that, because most everything else is prepaid. Like, you already are paying for your monthly car payment or your insurance or your registration. Like, those are all sunk costs. So having to pay for that parking and having a ding or a ping or some kind of, shingling of Scrooge McDuck coins or something that we all hear whenever that money leaves our account, like that seems like it would be useful. So I think we should do more of that.
No, I think it's this whole idea of nudging, right? I think it actually makes a lot of sense, and it's something that I am continuing to think about. In part, by the way, in Singapore, parking all goes through the same tolling system or technology system as congestion pricing. You leave a parking lot and it automatically deducts the appropriate charge without you having to pause at all. And it's interesting that way. I think that actually may be where we're headed in the US as well. I know there's some companies that are looking to integrate toll payment and parking payment and electric vehicle charging as well through basically like the car's sort of like computer system, if you will. So that may be where we're going.
Yeah, it would be nice because, to be honest, it is annoying when you go to a new place and all of a sudden they have a different app and you have to download the app and enter your license plate number and credit card and all that stuff. Like, it is not as easy as it should be, and there should be a little bit more consistency across the board on that, and there isn't. So, but once you go to a place once, like the second time is like orders of magnitude easier the second time you do that in a place. So people just have to get over that first hurdle.
Yeah.
And I think they're okay. But it goes back to what you were saying before, like people having to pay for parking, just it is so rare, especially maybe in a place like North Dakota, that, there's a visceral reaction to it and people get angry.
They're probably not used to it. My guess is that if you rewind 30 years ago, there was no parking shortage at all. Maybe there is now, but 30 years ago, nobody paid for it, and they don't really want to start paying for it. This is it's the same challenge with implementing congestion pricing, is people don't like to pay for something that previously seemed free, even if they were paying in their own time. And that's what's the case with parking as well as, being stuck in traffic.
But what we need to do to compensate for that, I feel like can be worse. And, for the cities that people are stuck in congestion, like that is the price you're paying for us not being willing to do like congestion charging or something like that to price the transportation system. Like,
that's right. It's not rational, but I think it's an interesting question of like how you help people to act in their own self-interest. It's actually a more complicated and interesting question than it might seem at first blush. Like, how do you help people to understand that they come out ahead when you implement a congestion pricing program or when you start charging for parking? And
I think you learned from New York to some extent is it's hard to do that before it's put into action. So people needed to see it and feel it and understand what it actually would be like. And it's hard to do that on the congestion side. Like on the parking side, I think people already know what it could be, but it still could be better. And I think there are places that do a better job of making the friction lower, but they need to add a ding or what is it, a chime? What happens in Singapore?
It's a ping. Yeah, one guy who worked for the government for several decades was like, he was laughing and saying, it's like you're sticking a little pin in me, like a little pin, boop, with that ping. He's like, I love it. I think it's great. We should always keep it.
Well, it's like
it's like he's a masochist.
It's like the ding dong of the New York City transit system that you hear on the subway or things like that. Like, I don't know, there are iconic transportation sounds, and paying for parking could become one of them.
Yeah, I think it could make sense. So anyway, it was fun. I'm glad we can talk about Singapore and Fargo, which are two cities that probably have never been discussed in the sim as like one versus the other in conversation before. So go
All
on.
right. Well, we end each episode with a toast, which we call rail drinks. So what are you drinking tonight?
I'm going to be honest with you. And just because I was,
I don't know why you wouldn't be.
This. Well, it's true. I am drinking Indonesian coffee spiked with a liqueur actually called Amarula, which is like South African version of Bailey's. The coffee is from Bandung, which is a part of Java. And I did a coffee tasting at the hotel where I was staying. And this was my favorite coffee. And yes, it's now 7:00 and I'm going to be up till God knows when because I've been drinking coffee. But I care about US. I care about our listeners. And I wanted to make sure I would not pass out halfway through. So that's what I'm drinking.
All right. I can also hear your cat in the background.
That's Waffle House, who I guess is acting caffeinated himself right now. You okay right there, buddy? He's right next to me. Sorry, go ahead.
All right. I am drinking, this is Congress Street. This is from Trillium. This is a brewery in Boston. This is actually one of the best IPAs I think you can get. And I'll be heading to Boston next week. So
nice.
I figured I'd have this.
Nice.
So Congress Street is, I think, right where their original brewery was. And that's where the Boston Tea Party was at one point, too.
Very cool. Well, cheers.
All right. Cheers.
It's weird saying cheers with coffee, but whatever.
Oh. Yeah, that's a good one.
I'm excited to get to go back to Boston. Shall I bring it home?
Yes. When are we back?
We are back with a recorded version due to travel limitations on June 11th. So you will get that into your podcast streams. Make sure you subscribe so you will get it. But we will do a live stream after that. Just stick around, follow us on Blue Sky, or, you can always just email us and ask, and we'll have a live stream soon after that. It'll be probably in late June. But all of our podcast episodes are available on lookbothwayspodcast.com, our website. You can also send us a message there. And if you enjoy the podcast, maybe, leave a review at Apple Podcasts or something to help other people discover it. But with that, I don't know. Is there anything I forgot, Wes? Anything else we should say?
Don't forget to look both ways.
Oh, that's very clever. I like that.
All right.
On that witty note, goodbye.